What you're about to hear now are shocking stories of cases of people who completely disappeared, and those who, for many years, their families and friends lost hope of ever seeing them again or knowing what really happened to them. However, years later they returned for some reason. But before we start, I would like to send a greeting and thank all these people who have followed me on my Instagram account. And remember that if you also want to be greeted in future videos, you just have to follow this profile that you are seeing now on the screen. Now, yes, let's watch the video. I dare you to leave your like and stay until the end of this if you dare. Stephen Kubacki. Stephen was a student at Hope University, a small private Christian university near the southeast end of Lake Michigan. In February of 1978, Stephen went on a several-hour adventure walk to practice cross-country skiing. He didn't come home that day, but when his family realized he didn't the next day either, they reported him missing. An extensive search was immediately started in which they managed to find his skiing equipment on the shore of Lake Michigan, along with some tracks leading to the lake, and there the trail was lost. Once an aerial search was conducted, they were able to confirm that his tracks stopped at the edge of the frozen river water. At that point, there was no evidence that the ice had broken or signs of what could have happened to Stephen. Later that same day, his backpack was found near the area where his skiing equipment was seen. Apart from this, no other clue was found. It was as if Stephen had vanished in the area. As he did not show up sometime later, the search was dismissed. 15 months later, in May of 1979, Stephen appeared at his father's front door. Stephen himself was surprised after learning that, to his family, he had been missing for 15 months. This is because, according to Stephen, he had very few memories of where he had been. Stephen recounted that he had suddenly woken up in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, that is 1,126 kilometers from where he had disappeared, and that he had woken up lying in a field and was wearing clothes that did not belong to him. He also said that he had a small backpack with maps that were not his and that he felt as if he had been running recently. His father lived in Pittsfield, 60 kilometers from where Stephen had woken up. And apart from those details, the man had no idea where he had been or what had happened to him during all that time. Subsequently, after his return, he refused to talk about his experience with the media, as he had no memory to explain what had happened. Likewise, he also refused to speak with a psychologist, since despite not remembering what had happened to him, he believed that he had no psychological problems. In 1983, Stephen obtained his degree in linguistics, and a year later he obtained a doctorate in clinical psychology. Some say that this experience allowed Stephen to finally achieve his goals, and that in this way he was able to help himself find himself. Tanya Kach. Tanya Kach grew up in Elizabeth in Pennsylvania, where she lived with her father and stepmother in 1996. She was 14 years old and studied at Cornell first. In that place, the security guard named Thomas Howes befriended Tanya, so he often took her out of her classes to talk to her. From that moment, they started a relationship, and as the relationship grew, he began to try to convince her to leave her home to go live with him. On February 10, 1996, Tanya packed her belongings and left the house. Her parents thought she had simply run away, as she had done in the past, so they didn't report her missing until a few weeks later. Because the girl had a history of running away from home, the police stopped looking for her after a few days. 10 years later, in the year 2006, a 24-year-old woman named Nikki Allen walked into a grocery store and told the store manager that her real name was Tanya Kach. She also told him that she had been kept hidden by Thomas Howes since she was a teenager. After hearing her testimony, the police arrested Thomas Howes. Fortunately, after Tanya escaped and made it home, she began writing a book about her experience called Memoir of a Milk Carton Kid. Tanya Nicole Kach's story, which translates to Memoirs of a Milk Carton Kid. The story of Tanya Nicole Kach in the book recounts her entire ordeal, which in summary, while Thomas was living with his parents, Tanya was kept in his second-floor room. Thomas took drastic measures to keep the girl hidden, such as, for example, she was not allowed to go to the bathroom, so she had to do her necessities in a bucket. Most of her diet was based on peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, a banana, and a bottle of soda. Once a week, Thomas would take her to the basement to take a cold shower. In an interview conducted by Tanya, she expressed that at first she felt good, as she was in love with that man. So she thought that she had to make all these sacrifices out of love for him. However, soon all that love seemed to have its price. In the year 2000, Thomas gave Tanya a new identity under the name of Nikki Allen. Then he introduced her to his parents as his girlfriend, who would be moving in with him. After this, Tanya was allowed to leave her house under a strict curfew. And after 10 years, Tanya escaped from Thomas's yoke. In 2007, Thomas pleaded guilty to several charges. William Bates. During the 1900s, Dr. William Horatio Bates was a highly respected ophthalmologist in New York. In August of 1902, William wrote a note to his wife saying that he had been called to perform some major surgeries. So he was very happy to get this income for the family. William added that he was in a hurry and that he would write more later. The note seemed strange, as William was already a man with a lot of money, so his enthusiasm about earning this extra income was unusual. The disturbing thing was that William did not return home, nor did he write, as he told his wife that he would do it later. Once this happened, his wife immediately started looking for him. Because William was a Mason, his wife turned to the Masonic Society to help her find him, so they spread his photograph all over the world. Soon, his wife received information that William was working as a medical assistant at Charing Cross Hospital in London, after having been admitted as a patient in the first place. Even though William had a bank account with a lot of money so he could live in the most luxurious area of London, it was said that he was living in poverty conditions. But even stranger was when his wife arrived and William couldn't remember her. However, the man accepted his wife's offer to stay at the Savoy Hotel in order to rest and help him regain his memory. At the hotel, he remembered being called to New York to board a ship and go operate on a person who had a brain abscess. Upon hearing this, his wife decided to stay in London and help him finish remembering what had happened. However, 2 days later, William left the Savoy Hotel and disappeared once again. From that moment on, his wife never saw him again. However, she never stopped looking for him over the following years, and even until the day of her death, in 1907 and 1910. Dr. Kelly, who was a good friend of William, passed through Grand Fork, North Dakota, and there he found William, working as an ophthalmologist in an office that he himself had established, shortly after having disappeared for the second time. Despite this, William still didn't remember anything from his recent past, and Dr. Kelly invited him to work with him in New York. William had been married 3 times and remarried a 4th time to a woman named Emily C. Learman, who was his personal assistant. For a long time, William never managed to recover his memory or any recollection of what happened to him after disappearing for the first time. Yet in Natasha Ryan. Natasha Ryan was a 14-year-old girl who lived with her parents in Rockhampton, Queensland. In 1998, on the 13th of August of that same year, Natasha's mother dropped her off at school. But once her mother returned to pick her up, the girl was not there, so she was reported as missing. An extensive and tireless search was organized to find Natasha. A month before her disappearance, Natasha had run away from her home after her 21-year-old boyfriend, Scott Black, encouraged her to do so. However, on that occasion, the girl was found 2 days later, and Scott had to pay a $1,000 bail after being found guilty of obstructing police work. For this reason, Scott was asked if he knew anything about Natasha's second disappearance, to which he replied that he had no information about her whereabouts. 8 months after Natasha's disappearance, another girl named Kira Steinhardt disappeared while walking from school to her home. After following many leads, the police arrested a man named Leonard John Fraser. Hopes of finding Natasha dwindled, so sometime later the case was closed. Thinking that she might have been another victim of Fraser, her family held a funeral in her name in Bundaberg, Queensland, when the girl turned 17 years old. In 2001, in 1999, Leonard confessed to being guilty, but it was believed that this confession had been made in an agreement with the police to be able to close the case. Years later, on April 10th of 2003, while Leonard's trial was underway in the Supreme Court of Brisbane, the police raided a house, and there they found Natasha. The girl was hiding in a closet. Apparently, the girl had been faking her disappearance all this time and had been living with her boyfriend Scott during all that time. During her first year missing, the girl had almost no contact with the outside world. She rarely went out, and most of the time she was inside her boyfriend's house with the lights off and the curtains closed. When a visitor arrived, Natasha would run to hide in a closet, and so it was for 4 years. The couple moved many times during the night to properties between the Yapong and Rockhampton areas. For the last 6 months, Natasha had lived in Rockhampton until the day she was found in 2003. 2 days later, Natasha attended the trial for her case and clarified to the court that she had never seen Leonard, just as she had never seen the witness who had claimed to have seen her with him before she disappeared. When all this ended, Natasha said that at the moment she wanted to reunite with her mother. Her lie had become so big that she almost preferred to hide. In the year 2005, Scott pleaded guilty to having lied to the authorities about Natasha's whereabouts. A year later, Natasha was found guilty of having provoked a false police investigation, so she had to pay a bail of $1,000. John Darwin. On the 21st of March, 2002, John Darwin, a teacher and former prison guard, went for a canoe ride in the North Sea and was last seen paddling in Seaton Cariab. When he didn't return home, his wife Ann Darwin reported him missing, and a search began that included the Coast Guard, and police were deployed from Seattle Cariab to Stuyvesant. The next day, his double oar was found at sea near Seattle Cariab. However, there were no signs of John anywhere, and sometime later, the search was called off. Months later, his dented canoe washed up on the shore of North Gate, specifically in an area known as Blue Lagoon. In April of 2003, Darwin was certified as dead. With the help of that certificate, his wife, now a widow, was able to claim his life insurance for an amount of £25,000. In addition, another £2,500 for his teacher's pension, £58,000 for his prison guard pension, as well as £4,000 in payment from the Department of Labor and Pensions and others, £137,000 from the Norwich Onion mortgage insurance policy, a total that his wife claimed of over £200,000. This was the case until the year 2007, when a man walked into the police station claiming to be Darwin Young, but he had no memories of the past few years, and that despite remembering his name, date of birth, and personal details, he could not remember where he had been. In a magazine, his wife Ann said she was very excited that her husband was alive. However, unbeknownst to the couple, the police had been investigating that disappearance, during which they received a tip that John was alive and living in Panama. But all of Darwin's lies would soon be known after a photo of him and his wife from 2006 was published on the internet, proving in this way that he was always alive and that his wife knew it. Apparently, this man faked everything to get out of some debts that arose from a bad property and assets business. Incredibly, his wife helped him carry out his plan. They both planned everything to be able to collect all the money from the insurance and also from the pensions. According to Darwin's story, shortly after his disappearance, he went to live in the Lake District, from where he called his wife every day to know when it was safe to return. Weeks later, he returned to his home and hid in an apartment attached to it. During the day, Darwin stayed there, and at night he would sneak into his main house through a secret bedroom door. The couple even lied to the whole family, and also to their children, who had no idea that their father was alive. So when there were visitors or other family members at his house, Darwin would stay inside the annex apartment. His wife, in the presence of their children, friends, and relatives, led them to believe that her husband had passed away. After some time, Darwin became more confident and dared to go out, wearing a hat and limping to hide his identity. But one day, one of his tenants recognized him and asked him several questions, so Darwin begged him not to tell anyone, and apparently he got away with it. In 2006, Darwin thought of a new plan to move to Panama and live a somewhat more normal life. So he applied for a birth certificate in the name of a person who was born around the same time as him, and using this certificate, he applied for a passport in the name of John Jones. At the same time, his wife told their children that she needed to start over and that she would move to Panama. The couple left for this country on July 14, 2006, and while there, they were photographed by a Panamanian real estate agent, and that photo was later published on the internet. The couple had planned to buy a house there, however, to proceed with the process. The agency had to confirm their names with the United Kingdom authorities. And as Darwin knew this would not work out, he came up with the idea to go back home and pretend that he remembered nothing of what had happened. However, by that time, the authorities were already investigating his disappearance, after an agent overheard a phone conversation between Anne and her husband. Anne was charged with 7 counts of fraud and 9 counts of money laundering, for which she was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison, of which she only served 3.5. On his part, Darwin pleaded guilty to fraud, one of the crimes for obtaining a false passport, for which he was sentenced to 6 years and 3 months in prison. However, he was released in 2011 after serving half of his sentence.